to a Labour government later this year.
Boris Johnson was turned away from his local polling station after forgetting to bring an acceptable form of photo ID. Did the same happen to anyone you know?
So the morning after, the night before, Tories look like they're waking up with a bit of a hangover and a bit of a headache. There's still plenty to come, though, Nana.
But I think they would have known that this was going to be a bad time for them. I mean, it's, you know, nobody knows what to do about them. It's very sad, but such is life.
I'll tell you what I'm looking forward to, the London mayoral election result, which comes tomorrow night. All eyes on that. And, yeah, lots more coming during the show today. We've got Dame Andrea Leadsom MP, the great broadcasting legend Alistair Stewart will be with us as well with some top analysis. But before all that, here's your news with Sophia.
Ben, thank you. Good morning. It's 9:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. And as you've been hearing, Labour has won Blackpool South from the Conservatives in yet another blow to Rishi Sunak's leadership. Labour's Chris Webb took the seat, beating Conservative David Jones in second, following a by-election caused by the resignation of Tory Scott Benton. Mark Butcher was third in a decent showing from the Reform Party. Labour leader Keir Starmer called the result seismic.
It is, of course, the most important election result in the sense that it's a direct message to the Prime Minister because this is a parliamentary seat. That's a 26% swing. That's a huge swing. And it's the fifth swing of over 20% in by-elections that we've had in recent months and years. So it's not a one-off. No denying the mood of the country now is for change. And I think it's for the Prime Minister to allow the country to express that change now in a general election.
And Labour has made huge gains in local elections across England and Wales, winning in key areas such as Rushmore in Hampshire for the first time. It's being seen as a major test of public opinion ahead of the upcoming general election. Labour also won Thurrock, one of its top targets, but the Tories held Harlow. Tory party chairman Richard Holden tried to put a positive spin on the results. Meanwhile, 38 police and crime commissioners are also being elected across England and Wales. Currently, Conservatives have 1 and Labour have 2 in the declared results. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Ben and Nana.
Very good morning to you. 9:34. You're with Ben, and I've got my Nana with me as well on this pivotal morning in British politics. Local elections, of course, the main story, I guess, is that Blackpool South seat, a massive swing to Labour. Is that a sign of things to come, Nana?
Well, I mean, you've seen it, but the turnout was very low, so it's just over 30% turnout. So if you look at the turnout, then I think a lot of Conservative voters stayed at home. But having said that, I think, yes, it is the taste of things to come. So
in 2019, Labour... Well, so yesterday they got 10,825 votes in that Blackpool South seat. They are down 1,730 on 2019. As you said, the turnout is, of course, a lot lower. But the Conservatives losing 13,000 votes
I know, it
in that
is
seat.
Unbelievable. Of course, that's Scott's old seat, isn't it?
Yes, Scott Benson, who, of course, was ousted after his lobbying scandal. But should we get stuck into some top analysis? As I said at the top of the show, we've got broadcasting legend Alistair Stewart with us, Dame Andrea Leadsom as well. And, yeah, it's going to be a cracking 2.5 hours. Well, you heard what Keir Starmer was saying, that it's time for an election, and he says that it was... Sorry, thank you. A seismic. He said that Keir Starmer says that the Blackpool South by-election was a seismic win. Here's the moment it was announced.
I declare that Christopher Paul Webb is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for the Blackpool South constituency.
So Labour's Chris Webb took the seat previously held by Scott Benson, who stood down following a lobbying scandal. Here's how it was decided. So Chris Webb, Labour Party, 10,825 votes. David Jones, Conservative, 3,218 votes. And crucially, this is the interesting point, Mark Butcher, Reform UK, 3,101 votes, just behind the Tories.
Well, the Green Party, 368 votes. Andrew Cregan, Liberal Democrats, 387 votes. So we're joined now by political correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, well, it's been a bit of a landslide so far. Is this what was expected? Because it sounds like, I mean, most people are thinking, yeah, we thought it would be bad, but do you think this spells the end for Rishi Sunak?
I think it was a really catastrophic night for the Conservatives. Obviously, all the results of the local elections aren't yet in, and we might not have a clear picture until Sunday. But from what we know so far, it has been very bad indeed. And certainly in Blackpool South, that result for the Conservatives couldn't really have been worse. A 26-point swing away from the Conservatives to Labour. Now, to put that in perspective, that is the third biggest by-election swing towards Labour since the Second World War, and it is now one of 6 swings over 20% since the 2019 general election. There is no way that Rishi Sunak can pass this off as sort of mid-term blues, mid-term angst, some sort of anomaly. The pattern over and over again is that Labour are winning these by-elections with enormous swings. The last time that we saw swings of this magnitude, this frequently, was in the period between 1992 and 1997, and of course that ended with that landslide victory for Tony Blair. Now, what the Conservatives are consoling themselves with today is the fact that enthusiasm for Labour doesn't actually seem to be that high. Yes, people don't want to vote Conservative, but in the local council elections, although the Conservatives have lost a huge number of seats, only about half of those seats have been lost to Labour. The rest have been lost to independents. So the Conservatives are trying to tell themselves that this isn't a 1997 moment because Keir Starmer doesn't have the same pull as Tony Blair. I mean, there is definitely some truth in that. But ultimately, for Labour, that doesn't really matter. General elections are won on who turns out to vote. Turnout might be low. In this by-election, it was only just over 32%. But if it gets Keir Starmer into 10 Downing Street with a huge majority, then Labour won't really be worrying about that, at least not until the election after this one.
Yes, Olivia, you mentioned independents doing well, of course, the Greens as well, especially in South Tyneside, picking up seats too. What about Reform UK in South Blackpool? They'll be feeling pretty bullish after that result, I suspect.
I suspect they will be feeling bullish. They wanted to come in second place. They wanted to pip the Conservatives to the post. They didn't quite manage to do that. They came third, but there was only 117 votes in it. It was a good showing from Reform, but was it good enough? In this period before the 2015 general election, UKIP, which is a rough equivalent to Reform, was polling higher and was actually doing much, much better in by-elections. So is this actually going to play out? For a long time now, Reform have been on the up. It's felt like they're about to break through, but they haven't got very much time left to break through. And coming third, albeit by only 117 votes, in an area where they've put in a lot of resources and a lot of campaigning time, it might be good, but is it good enough?
I mean, it just looks as though the Labour Party are just going to take everything pretty much. Do you think that it's more a sign of, if you look at it, that people are actually wanting a change, or it's just the fact that they're just really turning their backs away from the Conservative Party after the sort of mess that has ensued?
Well, I think, yeah, there is an element of people just wanting to turn away from the Conservative Party. And this is what I was saying about sort of voter apathy. Focus groups are showing that fewer people care who runs the country than almost ever before. Turnout is also very low, which is also reflexive of that. But does it really matter for Labour in the long term if it gets Keir Starmer into Downing Street? Does it matter whether people are voting Labour because they love the Labour Party offering or if they're voting Labour because they hate the Conservatives? Either way, it turns out with the same resolution. And I think that's what's so difficult for Rishi Sunak at the moment. The other question, of course, is when does he call that general election? He and the team around him are minded to hold off for as long as they possibly can. They're hoping that interest rates start to go down, people's mortgage misery is alleviated a bit, and of course that the Rwanda scheme gets up and running and we see a dip in illegal immigration figures. That's why he's been holding out for the second half of this year. But if results over this weekend are as catastrophic as is being predicted, and it looks like they probably will be, if the Conservatives end up losing sort of 500 council seats, then I think we can expect a number of letters of no confidence in Rishi Sunak coming in from disgruntled backbench MPs who think, well, maybe it's worth one final roll of the dice before the general election. And if that happens, then it could get to a point where Rishi Sunak feels that he has no option other than to go to the country a little bit early, perhaps in June or July.
Interesting. OK, Olivia, thanks very much. Yeah, will it, I mean, likely, would it be Rishi leading the party into a general election?
They can't do it again. They can't honestly be looking to try and get another leader. I mean, in my show the other day, we sang that song, Let's Go Round Again. Maybe we'll turn back the
But what have they got to
time.
lose? If it is as catastrophic...
They've got everything to lose. Nobody will look at them seriously at all. It's like the plane's going down and you're thinking, let's get another pilot in to steer it towards the sea. No point. Just get on with... I just say get on with running the country, because people are getting fed up with it.
Well, you've got Pretty waiting in the wings, potentially, Suella Braverman. I'm sure they'll all be lining up, but...
But who would do it anyway? Like, if you know the plane is about to, you know, hit the line...
Nice analogy, I like that.
Yeah.
Very well put. Well, look, it's been a very strong start for Labour as results from local council elections continue to come in across the country as one controller of a string of key Leave voting councils in England and Wales. So joining us now in the studio is our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Good morning to you, Catherine. Give us your judgment then on what's happened so far. Am I right in saying it's only really not even half-time yet, but
yes,
they are down a couple of goals?
We've still got a very, very long way to go with the local election results. Most of, I think we've only had about a third, just over a third of councils declare. But the Conservatives think they might lose ultimately up to 500 seats. At the moment, it does look like they may be on track for that. Labour have had a couple of particularly notable big wins. First of all, they've got Hartlepool back. Of course, when Keir Starmer lost Hartlepool back in 2021, it was the height of the vaccine bounce. Boris Johnson was riding high. He seriously thought about resigning, but look how things have turned around since then. So they've got Hartlepool back. They've also, and they're very happy about this, taken Rushmore in Hampshire. That's the home of the British Army. That is not the sort of place that you would ordinarily expect Labour to be taking, so they are trumpeting that very loudly.
I'm not sure if you know the answer to this question. Sorry to interject. Will there be a lot of squaddies living down there? Are there barracks down there?
Yeah, there are. There are.
Which is interesting, bearing in mind Sunak's defence budget bonanza.
Yes, and of course, you know, we've had Rishi Sunak last week upping defence spending to 2.5% by the end of the decade, making a lot of noise about that, and Labour traditionally have been seen as less trustworthy on defence, but it looks like that may be changed. A couple of crumbs of comfort for the Conservative Party, and they are just crumbs because it is not a good picture for them. They've managed to hold on to Harlow Council. Now, Keir Starmer was there yesterday saying, yes, this is the sort of place that we need to be taking. The Conservatives have kept it, albeit only by one seat. And the other little bit of good news for the Conservatives is that Labour have lost overall control of Oldham Council, and this is largely due to the war in Gaza. We saw Labour councillors resigning. A number have stood, independents have stood on a pro-Palestine ticket, chipping in to the Labour vote in areas with high Muslim populations where there's a lot of concern about what's going on in the Middle East, and also a lot of anger at what they perceive as Labour's stance.
It's interesting. With what we're seeing, is there the potential for the Muslim vote to become almost like the Reform vote is to the Conservative Party, sort of chipping away at that? Because that's, you know, I think whilst Keir Starmer seems to have sat back and everything's sort of fallen around him nicely, but he shouldn't attend things, because the Harlow one that he attended, sadly, they didn't win. So he's better stepping back.
Well, Certainly, George Galloway, of course, he's back. He won Rochdale, and Labour had to withdraw, well, their own candidate. They took their name off it, and he stood as an independent. And George Galloway rode to victory, making a lot of noise, saying the Conservatives and Labour, two sides of the same bottom cheek. Am I allowed to say that? Anyway, I've said it. Etc., etc. He's got candidates all over the place. And there are many traditional Labour voters that are very, very unhappy with the Labour leadership's stance. So, yes, it is possible. I think Sir Keir Starmer will be hoping for a meaningful ceasefire so that by the time there's an election, general election, probably towards the end of the year, if not sooner, that this issue will not have the resonance that it does now. I don't think it's going to eat into the Labour vote in quite as big a way as the Reform Party are eating into the Conservatives. Well, the Reform, I mean, last night in Blackpool, they got 16.9%. That's their best result ever. And they were within 100 votes of taking second place. Of course, whether they would actually get any seats in a general election, another matter, but they're potentially going to do massive, massive damage to the Conservatives.
And that's all they really wanted, really. I mean, of course, they'd love seats, but from the vibe I've got from Richard Tice and Ben Habib and so on, is that really their main goal is just destruction of the Conservative Party because they feel it needs to be remodelled in a proper Conservative image.
Yeah, and this is something that Nigel Farage has said as well. And of course, if, and it's a big if, and he's keeping us all guessing, isn't he? If Nigel Farage decided to come back and lead Reform, you would expect their vote share to go up even further. Of course, we don't know if that will happen. We've still got a way to go. But yeah, and plenty of Reform voters, when I go out around the country, you know, a lot of GB News viewers are Reform supporters, and they will say, if you say to them, well, all you're going to do is help Labour to get a bigger majority, they'll be like, well, we don't care, because we're so cross with the Conservatives that they deserve to be.
OK, interesting. And, of course, Richard Tice last night ruling out again any sort of electoral pacts with the Tories. So, Catherine, thank you very much. From one political powerhouse to another, Catherine, to Alistair Stewart. He's going to join us next in the studio in just a couple of minutes. Don't miss it. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Many of the people that you had invited to come and speak were people who've been elected in their own countries. I'm thinking of people like Suella Braverman. I'm thinking of Nigel Farage, who has been a member of the European Parliament, of course, had an enormous impact on British politics. And Viktor Orban, who has been elected and re-elected. Many people may not care for the Prime Minister of Hungary, but he's certainly an elected person.
And in addition, we had about 15 to 16 members of the European Parliament who were also elected, and they really live in Brussels. And you would imagine that Brussels, being the head of the capital of the EU, would allow elected members of its own parliament to have an opportunity to voice their views. So I think what was very interesting about this is that the mayors overplayed their hands, so that because they overplayed their hands, all public opinion became entirely on our side. It was so evident, so transparent, that this was really an attempt to use the police instead of arguments to react to our conference, that it was a real direct threat, and it is still a direct threat to the freedom of assembly and to free speech.
So how do you think it leaves it? Is it more likely or less likely that there'll be future bans?
I think this was a trial run. What I'm really worried about is that if the future of democracy and free speech depends on the ruling of one judge, and you have to remember that 3 other judges ruled against us, then democracy is in big trouble. What worries me absolutely is that a strong body of political opinion amongst established politicians believes that it is okay to cancel conferences and to crush the people's opinions and prevent the freedom of assembly. Democracy actually depends on these foundational values.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think.
I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. This is Britain's Newsroom. It's just coming up to 51 minutes after 9 o'clock. So, is it time up for Rishi Sunak? Labour has won the Blackpool South by-election from the Conservatives in yet another blow for the Prime Minister.
GB News contributor Alistair Stewart, of course, the legend. He joins us now in the studio. Alistair,
yes.
First of all, very privileged and happy that you're with us this morning. Thank you.
Well, I'm delighted to be back on what is already an extraordinary day, and as our correspondents like Olivia have been saying, there's yet more to come.
Yes, yeah, it feels like it's only half-time, or not quite there, but as I said to Catherine, maybe 2 or 3-0 down, the Tories. What do you make of the Blackpool South by-election result, that massive swing to Labour?
I think seismic is pushing it, but then that's Keir Starmer's job today, and I don't blame him for 1 minute. But I'll tell you what I don't think has been observed, and I'm going to say it and underline it. When, in similar circumstances, the Tories won Hartlepool by-election all those years ago, there was a huge inflatable of Boris Johnson that was floated above. The enthusiasm for Boris and for the Tories in those days was phenomenal. I really don't sense that enthusiasm for Labour. I think that, as a number of contributors have said, there is a real sense out there of, look, we want some change, we really do. Whether that's Labour or whether it's the Greens have had quite a good night as well, or whether it's Reform. And although Mark Butcher didn't butcher the Tories in Blackpool South, he did very well indeed. And it's going to be interesting to watch how Reform go on. I also think, and this is slightly tongue-in-cheek, there is an irony in the fact that when Boris Johnson went to vote, he forgot his ID, which was the way of proving that he is what he is. Because I think an awful lot of people out there are saying, what is the Conservative Party? What does it stand for now? Why should I vote for it? And in Blackpool South, an awful lot of them voted Reform.
Alistair, do you think, then, that this is a sign of how the Tories will fare in the general election? Or do you think that it might literally put a rocket up, I won't say any rudeness there, but you know where I was going with that one, and actually make them do something that may help in some way, or are they just heading down the abyss?
I think, sadly, almost tragically, it proves Labour's strategy of pushing hard, which they have in this campaign, and their spokespeople have been saying it on television and radio all morning, that it's vote for change, without saying specifically what that change would mean. And I think they're hoping that the time has come, as it occasionally does in British politics, where people just want to have a change. If you want to see whether Blackpool South is going to be really seismic for Labour going forward, then you've got to ask why they lost Oldham, why they didn't win Harlow, although Bob Halfon, the brilliant local MP, is standing down. A lot of their target places they haven't taken. They did take Redditch in the Midlands, which a number of Labour people have said to many of us, if we take Redditch, then we really are on target for this. With by-elections, they come and go. You know, if the three of us went into a darkened room now and said, right, let's list the 5 most significant by-elections in the last 10 years, we'd be quite hard-pressed to do it, because by-elections, frankly, come and go. But I think that it's time for a change will be the mantra, and it could get friction.
Just in 30 seconds, Alistair, you've covered a fair few of these elections, both nationally and local. Can you remember a capitulation similar to the Tories from 2019 to now? Because it has been emphatic, hasn't it?
It has. The thing that it reminds me most of is the final demise of Margaret Thatcher, in the sense that it wasn't the Labour Party and Mr Kinnock that did for her. It was the Tories themselves.
Alistair Stewart, thank you so much. Appreciate it. We'll be back in just a second. 2 seconds.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Again, some places looking fairly soggy today, but it should be a brighter day across parts of the south and another mostly fine and sunny day across northwest Scotland. Elsewhere, though, a lot of cloud around this morning. Outbreaks of rain still over the Midlands, Wales, parts of southeast England. Some heavier rain coming into parts of northern England as well. We'll see a few showers developing for Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, but I say most of Scotland again set fair. And again, on the west coast, we could easily see temperatures up to 20 Celsius. Cooler on the east coast with a brisk breeze here, and obviously much cooler than yesterday, where we've got the cloud and rain over the Midlands, parts of northwest England and East Anglia. The far south seeing a much brighter day compared to yesterday, staying generally fine here through this evening as the rain starts to edge further northward, staying pretty soggy over parts of northwest England, North Wales. We'll see more showers developing through the night across parts of Scotland. Temperatures mostly dipping down to about 5 or 6 degrees across the south, staying up at 9 or 10 Celsius in this cloudier zone over northern England, southern Scotland. That's making for a grey start to the long weekend. A bit more rain to come here, although it is tending to fizzle out. Again, Highlands, western parts of Scotland generally looking dry and bright. There will be some sunny spells on Saturday across the south, but we are expecting a few scattered showers to develop through the afternoon. But with a bit more brightness, should feel a touch warmer.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Buses replaced trains again today between Kilmarnock and Stranraer after a fire near the railway earlier. There's also a half-hourly shuttle train service running between Ayr and Prestwick Town. Buses also replaced trains between Scunthorpe and Doncaster after a landslip in Flintshire. The A541 is closed in both directions again today. Along Denby Road in Mould, it's still closed after a fire broke out on Tuesday afternoon. In Vale of Glamorgan, the A48 is closed in both directions at St Nicholas after an accident, causing delays each way towards and away from Cardiff. And in Cornwall, the A30 remains closed in both directions after an accident last night west of the A395 between Kennard's House near Launceston and the Gulf Petrol Station at Trewint. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
We've blown the budget by giving you the chance to win a totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Friday the 3rd of May. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Nana Akua, and Ben Leo.
Very good morning to you. Devastating blows for Rishi Sunak this morning. Chris Webb has been elected as the new Labour MP for Blackpool South.
Incredibly humbled. We had a record result here tonight, and I promised the people of Blackpool South I won't let them down.
A catastrophic night for the Conservatives and a fantastic night for Labour. Are we now in general election territory? Find out more with me very soon.
Well, and there are more results incoming. Local elections, mayoral elections and police and crime commissioners. Catherine Forster has the latest.
Yes, still a very long way to go. Results will be coming through right up to tomorrow, but dreadful results to the government so far. Will it lead to a challenge to the Prime Minister? I'll bring you more shortly.
And did you see this one? Boris Johnson, who else? He was turned away from his local polling station after forgetting to bring an acceptable form of photo ID. He was the man who brought the rule in. Did that happen to anyone else you know?
You think his face would be ID enough? Like, everyone knows who he is.
Well, they're just being jobs worth.
Do you think it's a bit of an extreme where somebody who you know is that person?
It was probably some Labour types, some lefties who thought we're going to get one on Boris here and send him away packing. But was it, I guess, the kind of personification of a night to forget for the Conservatives? So far, anyway. We're only a third of the way through. I keep saying it's not even half-time. They are 3 or 4-0 down, perhaps, but not looking good for the Tories.
Well, we'd love to hear what you think. Send us your views and post your comments by using gbnews.com/your say. But first, let's get your latest news with Sophia.
Nana, thank you. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. And as you've been hearing, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says his party's win in the Blackpool South by-election is seismic. Labour's Chris Webb took the seat, beating Conservative David Jones in second, following a by-election caused by the resignation of Tory Scott Benton. Sir Keir suggested it's time to call a general election.
It is, of course, the most important election result in the sense that it's a direct message to the Prime Minister, because this is a parliamentary seat. That's a 26% swing. That's a huge swing. And it's the 5th swing of over 20% in by-elections that we've had in recent months and years. So it's not a one-off. No denying the mood of the country now is for change. And I think it's for the Prime Minister to allow the country to express that change now in a general election.
The Reform UK candidate, Mark Butcher, came third, just 117 votes behind the Conservatives. Reform MP for Ashfield, Lee Anderson, told GB News the party is making huge strides.
To get 16.9% in the by-election in Blackpool is absolutely fantastic. It's our best ever by-election result. I was thinking about 15, 16%. Just 100 or so votes behind the Conservative candidate. You know, with a few more resources, and a little bit, more campaigning. Maybe if we got more bodies up there, we'd probably pip the Tories on this one.
And Labour has made huge gains in local elections across England and Wales, winning in key areas such as Rushmore in Hampshire for the first time. It's being seen as a major test of public opinion ahead of the upcoming general election. Labour also won Thurrock, one of its top targets, but the Tories held Harlow. Tory party chairman Richard Holden tried to put a positive spin on the results.
Obviously, there's been a mixed set of results. Some good Conservative colleagues have lost their seats and obviously have been out campaigning hard for them, and sorry for those guys out on the ground. But other places, I think we've overperformed compared to expectations as well. Places like Harlow, which we've held, visited twice by the Labour leader Keir Starmer just in the last few weeks. So there's a bit of a mixed picture there, but I don't want to say that things haven't been very tough for us this evening, coming off what was obviously those vaccine bounce elections in 2021, where we'd made gains after 11 years in government.
Meanwhile, 38 police and crime commissioners are also being elected across England and Wales. Currently, Conservatives have 1 and Labour have 2 in the declared results. Boris Johnson was turned away from his local polling station after forgetting to bring his ID. The former Prime Minister was attempting to cast his ballot in South Oxfordshire. New rules requiring photo ID to vote were introduced by Mr Johnson's own government in the Elections Act 2022. The change was rolled out last year, with the local elections in May 2023 being the first time voters needed to show ID. And Apple has recorded the biggest drop in iPhone sales in more than a year. Sales for January to March were down 10% on the same period last year, something not seen since the 2020 iPhone model was delayed due to lockdown factory closures. Sales slumped 4% year-on-year in the first 3 months of 2024. Executives said sales would return to growth in the months ahead, with upcoming product launches and investments in artificial intelligence. King Charles has been presented with an illustrated record of his coronation, almost a year after the historic service. The King has praised the team which created the document, saying, "You deserve a very stiff drink." He made the comments with the Queen on Wednesday in his second public-facing event since his cancer diagnosis. The document follows centuries-old tradition of creating a handwritten record on monarch's coronation. But it's the first time to use paper, not the usual animal skin, and that's reflecting the animal welfare views of the King. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Ben and Nana.
Hello, welcome back. It's 10:06. You're with Ben and Nana on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Lots of you getting in contact about Alistair Stewart, saying it's great to see him. He's looking well, and he's back with us in about half an hour. I think, Nana. So stay tuned for that. Emails flying in as well, talking about the election results. John, you say Rushmore has been won by Labour because of the state of the army accommodation repair under the Tories. And Sean, good morning to you, Sean. You say Boris Johnson thinking he needs no ID just goes to show how out of touch with reality they are. The sooner they're gone, the Tories, the better.
Do you think, though, but I mean, like, we know who he is. Like, it's when you go to the bank, they used to do this thing where known by the bank, but I suppose you could get a looky-likey, so there is the risk. Rick's been in touch. He said the Tories need a new Prime Minister now and delay the general election as long as possible. Trevor says not such a great Labour win in Blackpool South. Only 30% of the electorate turned out, compared to nearly 60% in 2019. Very true. He said the winning Labour vote was 2,000 lower than their second place in 2019. Yeah, it does seem the way, doesn't it?
Do you know what, Nana? I'm wondering this morning. You know, I've been thinking about it. All those Tory MPs who knifed Boris in the back.
It's just silly.
The MPs he won a landslide election for, got them in Parliament, and at the first sign of trouble, I mean, it was Chris Pincher who ultimately broke the camel's back. But really, the Partygate situation, having a bit of crusty M&S cake in Parliament, all the MPs who stabbed him in the back, what are they thinking this morning? Are they regretting it? Because I'll tell you what, Conservatives, normal people could see what was going to happen from that point.
Well, that's funny, isn't it? Because I saw it and I said it and I monologued it and said, don't do it, it'll be the worst thing that you could possibly do. But then they didn't listen, and obviously, if you are going to do that, I think you need someone better than the person you're getting rid of. And if you haven't got someone better, then just don't do it. But listen, stay tuned, get in touch with us in all the usual ways. But Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says that it's a win in Blackpool South. The by-election, he called it a huge win.
Yeah, Chris Webb, who won for Labour, the seat was previously held by Scott Benson, the chap who was involved in that lobbying scandal. That's why he had to stand down. And the new MP, Chris Webb, he spoke to GB News earlier this morning.
Incredibly humbled. We had a record result here tonight, and I promised the people of Blackpool South I won't let them down. Day in, day out, people were telling me that they're worse off under this Conservative government. They've had 14 years of decline in Blackpool. Blackpool's a worse place under this government. They want change, and they know a Labour government can deliver that. So I've been a community activist in the town for over a decade. I work with the food bank. I lead an award-winning mental health charity in Blackpool as chair of trustees. I know the issues in my community. I'm Blackpool born and bred. I see them day in, day out, and I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and get on with the job. Keir's very popular in Blackpool. We've seen that. He's a friend of Blackpool. He's been here several times meeting young people, going into our deprived areas, and always gets an incredible reception. And this is another vote for his victory and why people want him in Downing Street.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's just the lesser of all the evils. But listen, we're joined by political correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, so we've seen all the disaster for the Tories at the moment. Does this spell the end for Rishi Sunak?
Well, I think that's a really important question, and I think over the next few hours and possibly the next couple of days, things will become a bit clearer. Rishi Sunak wants to hold on for as long as possible. He wants to hold out on that election until October, November. That's what everyone around him is telling us. But he might not have the choice. If these local election results turn out to be as disastrous as is being predicted, if the Conservatives end up losing something in the region of 500 seats, then polling would suggest that in a general election, they might only win 100 or so parliamentary seats. That would be a far worse defeat than they suffered in 1997 under Tony Blair. If over the next few days that all bears out, then I think it is quite likely that Conservative backbenchers start writing those letters of no confidence in about Rishi Sunak. So far, they have held off writing letters on the grounds that changing leader this close to an election, a fourth leader in as many years, would be quite embarrassing. But at this point, they could think, hang on, maybe it is worth that final roll of the dice. And if we start getting into that sort of territory, if letters start coming in, even if Rishi Sunak thinks he could survive a no confidence vote, then he might feel that the sensible thing is to just call a general election now, to rip off that sticking plaster rather than to wait around while morale sinks and potentially the Tories go even further down in the polls. So we could be looking next week or so at a general election being called. I think that that is a more likely scenario than a Conservative leadership contest. I think that if we got into a situation where Rishi Sunak was even close to facing a leadership contest, he would instead choose to call a general election. So I don't think it's the end of Rishi Sunak per se, but I think perhaps it could be the end of this Conservative government. Things last night were more catastrophic than the Conservatives were predicting, and expectations were very low.
Olivia, thank you very much. It's interesting, isn't it, that they would consider going for another leader. We want them to get on with running the country, even if they've only got weeks left, and they're worrying about who's going to steer that ship into the abyss.
Well, I'd like to... it's kind of all seems a bit helpless, doesn't it, at the moment?
Well, I mean, they've done it to themselves, and that's the worst thing. I was a Conservative voter. I'm now... I am homeless in terms of who I could vote for. I don't know. And, you know, if they are talking about going for another leader, I think that the homeless of the electorate may consider finding a home elsewhere.
What I don't understand is, why does it... Maybe I'm just being too simplistic and ignorant of the political sphere, but why, when most people can see what the Conservatives' problem was, deal with migration, you know, sort out net zero, and so on, the big key issues... They've ignored them for so long, and it's only in the past couple of weeks that Rishi Sunak seems to have got his backside in gear. And also, as we mentioned a bit earlier, with the ousting Boris Johnson, we all knew what was going to happen.
I don't know why
Why are the only people who didn't know what was going to happen are the most important people, Conservative MPs, Conservative hierarchies and the power that be?
I think they were obsessed in that Westminster bubble. They get into that place, you know, and suddenly they can't see outside it. And I think that the pressure of the Partygate got too much for them, and they didn't think, well, what will happen? What would be the next move? If we get rid of him, what will happen to us? They thought. They didn't... I think they underestimated the value of charisma.
They thought Partygate would have been an election loser for Boris, but in actual fact, speaking to normal people on the street, which most MPs don't do unless they're knocking on doors for votes, they were completely wrong. I don't think people cared about Partygate.
I don't think they
I think the only people that cared about Partygate were the people who wanted Boris out of office.
Exactly.
And in actual fact, Angela Rayner even mentioned it in the Commons the other day when she was duelling with, was it Grant Shapps?
When she said, believe how lucky
you got rid of Boris Johnson, your only election winner.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, it's been a very strong start for Labour as results for the local council elections continue to come in.
Joining us now in the studio is our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, results coming in thick and fast still. Is there anything salvageable for the Tories over the coming days?
Well, there's a long way to go, but their sort of worst projection would be that they would lose about half the seats they're defending, but they'd lose about 500 council seats. And it looks at the moment like they are probably on track to be as bad as they fear. one very small ray of sunshine that they're clinging to is that they've managed to hold on to Harlow. And that is a place that Keir Starmer was in yesterday, saying this is the sort of place that Labour needs to get. But they only held on to it by one councillor. I mean, one councillor. So this is a pretty thin
victory. They asked for a
victory.
recount, because if it's one sort of... Was it one vote or one councillor?
One councillor, one councillor. So that's something
but
for them.
That said, in Harlow, Angela Rayner was there as well, wasn't she, in recent days? So both Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner. So, yes, it was only one seat. However, that is a key seat for the general election, isn't it?
Yes.
A battleground seat, you might describe it. So
yes.
What does that say about the fact that they threw Sir Keir Starmer down there, they sent Angela Rayner down there, and still it wasn't enough to win over the voters?
Well, it looks like, from the results we've got so far, that basically we're sort of in a holding pattern to where we were the local election results last year, in that Labour haven't really improved much on them, the Conservative haven't really got much worse, but it's pretty awful for the Conservatives, let's face it. Another small ray of comfort for the Conservatives is some evidence that Labour are going to get into difficulties with their stance on Gaza, because we've seen they've lost overall control of Oldham Council, where we had Labour councillors resigning in the autumn over comments that Sir Keir Starmer had made. They've got 5 independent councillors being elected specifically on a pro-Palestine ticket. So we could see, come the general election, that if the situation in Gaza, if there still isn't a meaningful ceasefire, that Labour will lose votes on that issue. But I don't think it's anything like as many as the Conservatives stand to lose to the Reform Party.
Now, what about the mayoral elections? Now, they're coming up. People that have criticised the Conservative Party for not getting behind Susan Hall, although I think, in my view, it's probably better that they just kept quiet and let it get on with it, because nobody's really... It feels like the Conservatives are falling apart. Is there a sense that Sadiq Khan is going to take that one away?
Polls can always be wrong, but at the moment, the polls are suggesting that he will win it, and by some margin. Of course, we won't get that result for London until tomorrow, and it does feel, as you say, Nana, that the Conservatives have not really put that much effort into London. I think they've accepted they're not going to get it. But the two, I think, that we really need to look out for in terms of the Conservatives' optics and the sort of feeling amongst Conservative MPs is the Tees Valley, Ben Houchen, the Conservative mayor. There's been a lot of investment gone into that region. He has been very popular. They are hopeful that they're going to keep that, the Tories. And also Andy Street in the West Midlands, that looks to be on a knife edge. We probably won't hear about that till tomorrow. But if the Conservatives keep both of those, they will hold those aloft and say, look at these, and we've got to stick with the plan, inflation's coming down, look at these tax cuts, blah, blah, blah. Of course, it looks like a lot of the electorate have simply stopped listening to the Conservatives.
Yeah, Boris Johnson, of course, he recorded a video message endorsing both those mayoral candidates in the North East. And, yeah, in London, Rishi Sunak wouldn't even say if he'd voted for Susan Hall in the mayoral elections.
But in a way, it's probably best for her because, I mean, he's not really very popular at all, so I don't think that would have worked in her favour.
Well, that's something to look forward to tomorrow night at the London mayoral elections. Sadiq Khan, Susan Hall, who's it going to be? That's a pay-per-view match-up. Still to come, it's not all about the elections today. We're going to be joined by our panel next to go through some of the other stories. Stick with us. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
TfL bosses have come under fire after banning an advert... Oh, God. They've banned an advert for a comedy show because it had a hot dog on it, because that supposedly promotes obesity.
The comedian Ed Gamble has swapped the image of the fast food favourite in favour of a cucumber instead. And there's the cucumber on the plate.
So is the UK turning into a nanny state? Let's talk to former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller, and nutritionist Olivia Parry. Good to see you both this morning. Olivia, it's a comedy show. He's not promoting eating hot dogs, is he? Is this just a load of nonsense?
The thing is, we have a huge problem with overweight and obesity in this country. We're fourth in Europe. It's big business. Advertising for food companies is big business. They make so much money. You just have to switch on primetime TV to watch, food after food advertisements. And it's for the youngsters as well, who don't have the nutritional education. We're not taught cookery in school anymore. People go to college and to university, they don't know how to cook.
But
and it leads
forgive me for jumping in, Olivia. Forgive me for jumping in, but the whole point with this is it's an advert for a comedy show.
Yes, I know, but this is a wider issue.
I think it's a load of old tosh, to be quite honest with you. It's a hot dog. In fact, I wish they'd have put onions on the hot dog. A bit of what you fancy won't hurt you. You should eat 80-20 anyway. We talk about a nanny state. I actually think, arguably, we're becoming an authoritarian state. Opinions banned. Comedy banned. The England flag banned. It's like we've got to wear a virtual muzzle.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, 21 minutes after 10 o'clock. This is Britain's Newsroom with me, Nana Okwir, and Ben Leo.
Good morning to you. Right, so Labour MP Chris Webb, he won, of course, the election in Blackpool South, the by-election. The result came in the early hours of the morning. But did you see this tweet from Lee Anderson of Reform UK last week about the litter in one of the streets there? Take a look.
It's been flooded with migrants living in
Oh, we seem to have lost that. But anyway, he was basically going through the street somewhere in Blackpool, and you can see all the litter that is in there. And I saw this and I thought, my God, this is terrible.
What a dump.
Well, it is a dump, and apparently it's where there are a lot of asylum seekers who are living, and it's literally on the back of the houses. Well, 2 days after Lee's video, the council jumped into action and cleared the alleyway. So we're joined now by political commentator Emma Webb and broadcaster Amy Nicole-Turner.
Good morning, both of you. That reminds me of Brighton Council used to be a green council for many years. It was the first green council in the UK, and they had the worst recycling rates in Europe, which tickled me at the time. But yeah, should we talk about the local elections? Boris Johnson, he rolled up to the polling station without ID, and it was his legislation that enforced that rule.
I wonder whether he did it on purpose, because, look, we're talking about him now, aren't we? And his is one of the top stories of the day. He's managed to get himself into the news around the election at a time when people are trying to pressure the Conservative Party to bring him back in the hope that he might be able to save them from a complete bloodbath at the next general election. So I do wonder whether he did it on purpose. I don't believe that Carrie wouldn't have reminded him, by the way, Boris, don't forget to take your ID, as he was leaving to go and vote. But of course, there are people who were turned away. The veteran ID has been in the news this morning. But I ultimately, I think it's a good piece of legislation. We need to know that the people who were voting are the people who were who can validly vote.
So someone tweeted yesterday. They said, showing voter ID this morning left me with a very disturbed feeling, as I've never had to show ID in my country before. I find it very sinister, Amy.
I think that's a bit of paranoia there. I don't know. You have to show ID when you go to the tip, don't you? Like, it's not a big deal. But something about Boris Johnson thinking that he might have done it on purpose, I think that's interesting, because to me, it just completely summarises his whole leadership and his everything about him. feckless, forgetful, no detail, just all the chaos.
It's important to know he did go and get his ID and he went back and he was able to vote. I should mention that.
So what? Like, this is just him, isn't it? Oh, I'm going to bluster into the thing. I'm going to vote however I want. I'm not going to need to bring my ID. I can do what I want. I'm a law unto myself. That was kind of his vibe throughout. So for me, it's just a reminder of his premiership.
But you say that, but look at what's happened to the Conservative Party. It's even worse without him. You didn't think it could get worse if you didn't think it is worse. But do you not think there is an element of it is Boris Johnson? You know who it is. It's like if, just for example, the King went there to vote. Now, I'm sure the King would bring his ID anyway, but do you not think there's a little bit of jobsworthiness in there when we know it's him? We know that is Boris Johnson.
The rules apply to everyone equally. I think I'm quite proud that we live in a country where he couldn't just get away with it. I'm happy that
What if somebody didn't? What if it was a looky-like that happened to have ID? I think, you know, like, do you know what I mean? I just think, you actually know that that's him.
The rules apply to absolutely everyone. And it's funny because, as Emma said, it was the Conservatives that brought in this voter ID policy. And then shortly after, Jacob Rees-Mogg essentially admitted that it was gerrymandering that had backfired because they assumed younger voters wouldn't have the ID when actually it was the older.
But what is interesting is that Sadiq Khan was also opposed to this, but if you remember, he insisted that people had photo ID to go and see the London fireworks.
Yes.
So maybe he was being discriminatory there and not being inclusive enough if you thought that ethnic minorities and young people were not going to be able to go and enjoy the fireworks. But what's interesting on the gerrymandering argument is that that's been definitively proven now to be incorrect, because as we've seen with these results, it's been a complete Labour landslide. The voter ID hasn't had the effect of deterring Labour voters from going to the polls, which is obviously what their concern was in the first place.
However,
what about the veterans' cards, though, that wasn't accepted?
I know.
Just seems a bit absurd.
Well, yeah, but there's 22 different forms of ID that would be accepted. So there's a lot of options. And I'm not actually one of these people that thinks, we shouldn't have this. I think it's in principle quite a good idea, even though when it came in, there were only about just over 100 cases of election fraud. So it wasn't a massive problem that needed dealing with. I know, because if it was decent fraud, you wouldn't find out. I could totally get that. But it did seem like maybe a problem that didn't need fixing, and then the motivation for bringing it in was
it's the mail-in ballot
demographic.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to deal with voter fraud, yes, this is one thing, but ultimately the thing that really needs to be tackled is fraud, potential fraud through mail-in votes, because you could have people who don't even speak English where the head of their household just votes on behalf of everybody there, and that is fundamentally undermining to democracy. So I think obviously this is taking it off on a tangent.
Have you ever forgotten your ID and just frantically tried to do anything like, look, this is my Twitter, if you Google my name, it's my picture? Well, I feel like the Boris Johnson thing's a bit like that.
Once, when I went to the supermarket, it was like about 2 years ago, and they weren't going to serve me the alcohol because I didn't look old enough. I was so flattered. I bet you do. I was so flattered. I was like, until I realised they actually weren't going to get me the drink.
Well, I forgot to re-register to my new address, so I had to do a 3-hour round trip to go and vote where I was previously registered to vote. And I almost did forget my ID, and luckily I managed just at the nick of time to go back and snatch it.
But at least you don't get ID'd for Red Bull still, like I do. You need to be 16 to buy Red Bull. Apparently, I know I look quite young, but apparently I don't look 16.
Well, my car got clamped and I had to taken away, and I had to get in my car, and you have to have it. It's ridiculous. They get there and go, right, you need this form of ID, that, and you're like, nobody's got that. And one woman, her ID was in her car that they had taken away, and they wouldn't let her get it.
Should we move on to Ireland? Lots of furore with the migrant situation there. Rishi Sunak has offered Ireland the chance to join the Rwanda scheme.
Oh, what a chance.
And Downing Street's rejected the Irish offer to take back asylum seekers.
I'm sure it's an offer they can't refuse, as it's turning out to be such a roaring success. So since Rwanda came in, big deterrent, the legislation passed. We had 711 crossings yesterday, up 34% on this time last year. And then a hilarious stunt this week, wasn't it, with the plane slowly taking off and them trying to parade that as an example of success, only when it came out that they actually paid that migrant £3,000.
But that's a standard thing.
And a chartered jet.
No, but there's a volunteer scheme, and that's offered to people from all countries. So if you came from Ukraine or wherever, there is the offer, and they'll pay you the money. So that was, and if you go voluntarily, then you can't come back. And a lot of people will take that as an option anyway. So I don't think that's a bad thing.
That would be nice and cost-effective.
But what is wrong with Rwanda? Why is it bad to be sending people to Rwanda?
Well,
I'm not quite sure what the problem is.
Well, it's a dictatorship. It's got a lot of history of political violence, particularly against migrants, against journalists, for example.
In the last... When did you hear this?
When Israel sent some voluntary migrants there, a few of them ended up being shot.
How long
dead.
ago was that?
I think that was in 2018.
OK, so even if that story is true, OK, so let's go with it, that's not the deal now. So bad things do happen, but that can't tar the entire scheme, especially with all the checks and balances that are put on it now.
I think it's, 5 Supreme Court judges have said that Rwanda is not a safe country in the sense that when the migrants get there, there's no guaranteeing that they will stay where they are, and they might end up in another country or
well,
in
that's...
where should what I'm saying is that I trust the judgment of the 5 Supreme Court judges over our politicians who are just scrabbling around for policy answers.
Yeah, to me, I feel a sense of racism in there somewhere.
No,
that's what I say.
Not.
I do sense that, because Rwanda may have had a genocide many, many, many years ago, but how long was it before we were trading with Germany after what happened in the war? We're probably trading with them literally within years.
I'm sure it's a great holiday destination. I'm sure it has plenty to offer, but it is not safe for migrants.
Know that.
I know how migrants have been treated in Rwanda.
And you would say, what about this country, though? Do we treat migrants well here? Well,
I mean, much better than you get treated in Rwanda.
Well, there was a video of a migrant they were talking on Newsnight, and they said, well, why don't you stay in Greece? He'd got to Greece, they said, Greece is a safe country. He goes, I don't want to live in a tent. Because Greece were providing tents there, and they are a nation within Europe, OK? They are all the normal things are supposed to follow, but people go in tents there.
I know, but he's not obligated to stay in Greece in a tent. He could move on, as we all would if we had to live in a tent.
Yeah, all right. Well, I mean, Arsenal, they flog Rwanda holidays on their shirt.
Exactly.
Visit Rwanda. All around the Emirates Stadium, so it can't be that bad, Amy. Anyway, Amy, thank you for your contributions. Let's get your news headlines with Sophia.
Thanks, Ben. It's 10:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your headlines. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says his party's win in the Blackpool South by-election is seismic. Labour's Chris Webb took the seat, beating Conservative David Jones in second, following a by-election caused by the resignation of Tory Scott Benton. Sir Keir suggested it's time to call a general election.
It is, of course, the most important election result in the sense that it's a direct message to the Prime Minister, because this is a parliamentary seat. That's a 26% swing. That's a huge swing. And it's the 5th swing of over 20% in by-elections that we've had in recent months and years. So it's not a one-off. No denying the mood of the country now is for change. And I think it's for the Prime Minister to allow the country to express that change now in a general election.
Labour has made huge gains in local elections across England and Wales, winning in key areas such as Rushmore in Hampshire for the first time. It's being seen as a major test of public opinion ahead of the upcoming general election. Labour also won Thurrock and Hartlepool, but the Tories held Harlow. And King Charles has been presented with an illustrated record of his coronation, almost a year after the historic service. The King has praised the team which created the document, saying, "You deserve a very stiff drink." He made the comments with the Queen on Wednesday in his second public-facing event since his cancer diagnosis. And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2558 and €1.1690. The price of gold is £1,831 and 47 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 1,207 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
It's Still to come, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has hailed his party's by-election win in Blackpool South as seismic. We're going to be joined by a staunch Labour supporter next, and he looks like a man who has got the cream, or cat that's got the cream, rather.
Cat that's got the cream.
Also, Alistair Stewart, OBE, legendary broadcaster, he's back with us in the next couple of minutes. Stick with us. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Buses replaced trains again today between Kilmarnock and Stranraer after a fire near the railway earlier. There's a half-hourly shuttle train service operating between Ayr and Prestwick Town. Buses also replaced trains between Scunthorpe and Doncaster after a landslip. Now in Flintshire, the A541 remains closed each way along Denby Road in Mould after a fire broke out on Tuesday afternoon. In South Wales on the A470, there are southbound queues where there's a report of a problem between Abercynon South and the Bridge Street interchange at Pontypridd. And in the Vale of Glamorgan, the A48 is closed in both directions at St Nicholas after an accident, causing queues in both directions, affecting traffic heading towards and away from Cardiff at St Nicholas. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Leading motoring organisation has called for all new drivers to be banned from giving lifts to friends for 6 whole months after passing their tests.
Yes, the AA says around 5,000 people every year are killed and seriously injured in crashes involving at least one young motorist. Graduated driving licences introduced with limitations imposed on a period of time after a driver passes their test. So a two-tier system.
Well, is this sensible or yet more ageism when it comes to regulating our habits in the United Kingdom? Let's speak to Quentin Wilson, a motoring journalist and transport campaigner. Really interested to get your thoughts on this, Quentin. There are a lot of people who instinctively will say this is state overreach. This is telling adults that they can't do something that they've done for generations. What's your view?
Well, look, the recent accident with the convertible Mini where people were twerking in the back, this is due to driver education. The person in control of that car really should have told the passengers just to buckle up and stay still. We're not teaching kids to drive properly. We expect them to do all this stuff below the dashboard, grinding of gears, hazard perception, positioning of car in this very, very small time window when we should be doing it from school age, teaching hazard perception. So I've been a patron of an organisation called Young Driver, who's delivered 1.4 million lessons to 11 to 17-year-olds on private land with ADI qualified instructors with dual controls. And the accident rate for that group is 4%. The national average is 20%. So look, we can do this. We can reduce these fatalities if we teach kids earlier about road safety.
Is this an issue, frankly, with teenage boys and showing off?
The testosterone does always seem to come through, doesn't it?
Welcome back, 10:37. Ben and Anna with you on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Now, Labour has won the Blackpool South by-election from the Tories in yet another blow for Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister.
And one man who's absolutely delighted this morning is Sir Keir Starmer. Of course he is. He's like the cat that's got the cream.
That's how you say it. Not the man that's got the cream, cat that's got the cream.
Here is what the Labour leader had to say. This win in Blackpool South is the most important result today. This is the one contest where voters had the chance to send a message to Rishi Sunak's Conservatives directly, and that message is an overwhelming vote for change.
He went on, the swing towards the Labour Party in Blackpool South is truly historic and shows that we are firmly back in the service of working people. Our new Labour MP, Chris Webb, has shown that after years of neglect with the Tories, there is a better alternative. The message to Rishi Sunak is clear. It's time for change. It's time for a general election.
Well, he would say that, wouldn't he? Well, joining us in the studio is a very smug former Labour MP and Minister of State for Europe, Dennis McShane. I like to call him Oh, I won't say that. I was going to say Penfold.
You're always so sweet, Nana, so sweet.
Dennis, are you smug about this result?
No, not at all.
Really?
I mean, it's completely predictable. It's on the cards. The polls have been saying it for months. And I'm old enough to live through similar great days for the Tory party, great days for the Labour Party. The only thing that matters now is how Labour will govern. And we won't know that till they're in power. There's no point thumb-sucking. I can read the Daily Telegraph 4 articles a day saying Labour government will be a disaster. That's total drivel. A lot of civil servants, a lot of business, a lot of economic actors know that we need to repair, renew, reform Britain. The way we do it will be incredibly problematic. It won't be easy, but there'll be a lot of goodwill to begin with. But as always in politics, the politicians live or die by the results they produce. And Tony Blair was there in 1997. I think you interviewed, or somebody did, come to me about my book about that, the diaries of that era. And we kept delivering results for the first few years. Then we hit the buffers of Iraq, war and so on. And the Tories were delivering results until they turned to Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. And we've just had the disastrous recent years.
Well, hang on, Dennis. You said that the Tories were delivering until they turned to Boris. Boris won an 80-seat majority.
I know.
Surely getting rid of Boris was their terminal mistake.
That, though, is a false illusion. Blair won a very, very big majority in 2001
well, no,
and again in 2005.
He just said it's a false illusion. He did win an 80.
No, he did.
So
but it gives a false hope then that he then opted for the hardest imaginable Brexit, having promised in 2016, after the referendum result, which we all accepted, you'd be able to live, work, travel, businesses would have no problems.
People didn't accept it, though, did they? They repelled against it. Even now, there is a repellent, and people are told, oh, it was a big mistake, you should never have gone to Brexit. And there's a big... Even now, I get people, oh, I bet you wish you hadn't done that now. I don't wish anything different. I'm glad I did what I did. I'm annoyed at the way they've done it.
Fine, I accept that. That's called democratic politics. Right. I mean, you have a vote, you elect a government, you're entitled to say after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that government's not doing very well, we're going to change it. But there seems to be an absolutely rigid idea that even saying, let's see if we can do something different with the Brexit rules Boris has bequeathed us and let our businesses grow, let the London stock market come back to life.
Civil servants have been unhelpful. The civil service, even now, I think they're talking about not doing anything for Rwanda. And, it feels like, although the Conservative government have been in, it does feel like there has been a blight, and that has been the civil service and anybody else.
No. I mean, with all affection and respect, unlike you, I was there. The civil service will do what the Prime Minister orders.
No, they won't.
They will. What they won't do is what other ministers do, or junior ministers like me, if the Prime Minister's authority and power, which is why the civil service have delivered on this preposterous Rwanda scheme. They know it's illegal. They don't fall foul of the European Court.
But they're still objecting.
Sorry, Nana. It's not up to the civil service to dictate government policy. No. If ministers and the government are saying, we want to do this, get this done, they should be apolitical.
But of course they have. They've delivered a bill written by parliamentary draftsmen that says the ludicrous fantasy that Rwanda is a safe country. You don't want to repeat the session of a moment ago. Now, trust me.
You're saying it's a ludicrous fantasy, so you are now stepping into the conversation.
Of course I am. That's what I think. That's what I know. I do track these things. I've been tracking Rwanda for a number of years.
Have you been to Rwanda?
No, I haven't. I haven't been to North Korea. I haven't been to other African despotic countries.
We're not using North Korea, are we? Well, what is your objection? Why is Rwanda so unsafe in your view?
I'm just reporting what the US government says. It's not exactly a left-wing government. I'm reporting what Amnesty International says. I was in France.
What about the UN who use Rwanda?
UN agencies also say that. Now,
they use Rwanda.
The problem is that we'll have to it'll end up in courts. You and I spluttering about it on either direction. It'll end up in the court and it'll then go to the European Court of Human Rights. I don't think it'll happen under the Sunak government. I mean, any government before the election. If it does, then is Mr Sunak really going to leave?
What's Keir Starmer going to do, though, about it?
That's a very good question. And do you know something? I can't answer this endless question, what will Keir Starmer do? and nobody can. And I doubt if Sir Keir
Not even
can.
he has told us.
No, I doubt if he can. And I've made this point endlessly, this endless demand. You know, what will you do about Rwanda? What will you do about Angela Rayner? What will you do about GB News? It's just silly chatter at the moment. And we should just accept the fact that you're going to have this government. Look at all the individual ministers. I know them, some are friends. I think, person for person, they're better than the current guys.
Well, sorry to interrupt there, Dennis, but talking of individual ministers, so Wes Streeting, I actually thought he was quite a decent bloke up until about a few weeks ago. First of all, he got up on the dispatch box commenting on the NatCon conference in Belgium, in Brussels, that had been shut down, laughing away like a juvenile schoolboy with his MPs behind him. It was pathetic. That was bad enough. And then this tweet, I don't know if you saw it.
I did.
Talking about Susan Hall,
yes.
Wes Streeting said, let me just repeat it for anyone who isn't familiar with it. He said, a win for Susan Hall and the Conservatives in the London mayoral election is a win for racists, white supremacists and Islamophobes the world over. What kind of language is that from a government in waiting? Calling people who are concerned about net zero, about knife crime, about teenagers getting knifed to death on our streets, calling them white supremacists. Has he lost his head?
Ben, if you really want me to go through everything Susan Hall has said...
No, I'm talking about Wes Streeting.
They were not...
I don't want to talk about Susan Hall, I'm talking about Wes Streeting.
Well, I'm sorry, you are. You're defending her.
No, I'm not defending Susan Hall. I'm not pro or against Susan Hall. I'm talking about Wes Streeting.
Let's be very clear. You say not pro, that's a very easy position. I have been looking at her. I don't know why the Tories chose her. There are so many other better candidates.
Can you stick with
There's
the
that tweet.
This is the tweet.
I've seen the tweet.
Yeah, but
not to be my words.
This is a government in waiting. This is one of the potential ministers who'll be in charge of a lot of policy. And he's calling somebody white supremacist.
He will be in charge of the fact that we have a great number of people in this country now, from the Irish community I grew up with, Jews, now Muslims, now people from the Afro-Caribbean countries. We have invited them in. Rishi invited in 654,000 Indians, Pakistanis and Nigerians last year. They have different values, different cultures, and Susan Hall is the most divisive politician.
So you're not going to answer the question. You're not going to answer that, whether you think that's a... Is that a good
I've said it's not words I would have used.
Any of those words, none of it, all of it.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Some of those words... I'm sorry. I tracked Susan Hall.
Are people that vote for Susan Hall white supremacists, Dennis?
No. Is she, though, a person who's constantly attacked the presence of Muslims in our midst?
Is Susan Hall a white supremacist?
I would say that she comes pretty close.
Oh, God.
Oh, Dennis McShane. Well, at least we got it out of you. She comes pretty close, so that's a sort of...
Well, the vote is over now.
But you're actually saying that she comes close to being a white supremacist.
Wait for the votes to be counted on Saturday. Let me say, I've been astonished even yesterday at the hostility to Sadiq Khan, and it's about cars. And it's something Labour have...
We are really running out of time.
It's also, Dennis, about kids dying on our streets, not just about cars. But there we go.
Thank you for being
West
Midlands, which is a 57% increase in crime.
She comes close to a white supremacist, is what you said about Suzanne Hall. You did say that, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, very happy to.
OK, up next, we're going to be joined by broadcasting legend Alistair Stewart. He's back. He's going to be giving us his expert analysis on the election results. You're with Britain's Newsroom with Ben and Anna on GB News. Stay with us.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Again, some places looking fairly soggy today, but it should be a brighter day across parts of the south and another mostly fine and sunny day across northwest Scotland. Elsewhere, though, a lot of cloud around this morning. Outbreaks of rain still over the Midlands, Wales, parts of southeast England. Some heavier rain coming into parts of northern England as well. We'll see a few showers developing for Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, but I say most of Scotland again set fair. And again, on the west coast, we could easily see temperatures up to 20 Celsius. Cooler on the east coast with a brisk breeze here, and obviously much cooler than yesterday, where we've got the cloud and rain over the Midlands, parts of northwest England and East Anglia. The far south seeing a much brighter day compared to yesterday, staying generally fine here through this evening as the rain starts to edge further northward, staying pretty soggy over parts of northwest England, North Wales. We'll see more showers developing through the night across parts of Scotland. Temperatures mostly dipping down to about 5 or 6 degrees across the south, staying up at 9 or 10 Celsius in this cloudier zone over northern England, southern Scotland. That's making for a grey start to the long weekend. A bit more rain to come here, although it is tending to fizzle out. Again, Highlands, western parts of Scotland generally looking dry and bright. There will be some sunny spells on Saturday across the south, but we are expecting a few scattered showers to develop through the afternoon. But with a bit more brightness, should feel a touch warmer.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise
and who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's 10:50. You're with Ben and Nana on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Now, there are mayoral elections taking place in 11 regions in England.
Now, all eyes will be on Tees Valley in West Midlands, where Tories Ben Houcham and Andy Street are currently in charge. If they lose their posts, could that be the end for Rishi Sunak?
Well, we won't find out about the West Midlands results until tomorrow, but Tees Valley could be declared any moment now. Delighted to be joined again by GB News contributor and broadcasting legend Alistair Stewart.
These big mayorship or mayoralties are fascinating because it goes way back to John Prescott's day. He was one who really loved them. George Osborne, funnily enough, with David Cameron, quite liked them as well and embraced them as well. The key thing about them is they have real power and influence. People like Andy Burnham, who many say would make a better Labour leader than Keir Starmer, has really stamped his authority on Manchester. The other thing I find fascinating about Teesside and about the West Midlands is that both Ben Houchen and Andy Street are their own men. They've hardly touched Rishi Sunak. They've hardly touched the central Tory brand. So if people, as we were saying earlier on, are fed up with the Tories but still don't want to go the whole hog and vote for Labour or Lib Dems or what have you, then they're OK with Lord Houchen and they're OK with Andy Street, very much their own men. So my instinct, looking at the polls, is that the Tories could well have a good afternoon and they could well hold one of them this afternoon and the other one, as you quite rightly said, tomorrow. London is also fascinating because that's just round the corner.
What's your thoughts on London?
Well, the Tories are putting out that they've done much better than they expected to do. There's one seat within the London area where the Tories have only got a 2,000 majority. If Labour took that as well as Sadiq Khan holding on, then that really would be quite significant because there's a whole stack of marginal seats in and around London, and we've already seen quite a few where Labour have not done anywhere near as well as they need to do in Essex and on the north banks of the Thames to be sure of winning a general election. Harlow, which has stayed Tory, always goes with the winning party of the general election. At the moment, it remains Tory, even without the Tory MP who said he's not going to stand again.
And Sir Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner both visiting Harlow the day before the election. So what does that mean?
I think it's a bad thing, actually. I don't think it's working for them.
They've been listening to Professor Curtis.
Do you think, because a lot of people have said that Suzanne Hall didn't get much support from the Tory party, do you think actually it's better that she didn't, so she's slightly distanced from them?
No, I don't personally. I mean, I think mavericks are always tricky, as Keir Starmer may well find this afternoon as well, when you get Rochdale and the Workers' Party, George Galloway, who's a master of by-elections himself, of course, that he could be eating away. I mean, my own view is, if your instincts are Conservative, which clearly Andy Street's are, very successful businessman in his own right, and Ben Houchen as well, then I think you should embrace the party that most represents what you think and makes you tick. And I think that would be better for the individuals, and I think it would be probably better for the party. But as we've already seen right across the piece, these elections are fascinating because there are lots of opportunities for people to do their own thing. Just talking to my old mate Dennis McShane on his way out, talking about Oldham, he's very upset about that because the Gaza and Palestine issue has been very, very strong in many areas, like, and I mentioned Rochdale as well. And those are big issues that the leaders really need to get a grip with, as they eventually did in the case of Labour with anti-Semitism.
Is the issue of Gaza, though, not confined to those, the northern seats, Oldham, Bolton, Rochdale, in places like, in Oldham, etc., where are the key battleground seats for the general election? Is it going to be that much of an issue for Labour?
I don't think that's a very good point, because I don't think they're confined to those areas. I think simply because of the demography that they're more important there. But in London, you talk to people wandering around London, and there, one of the big issues, and it is an issue for Sadiq, is policing. How these huge demonstrations are policed and people being told you can't cross the road because you look Jewish.
Yeah, awful scenes. Alistair Stewart, thank you so much.
Good to see you. See you again later.
Thank you.
Here's your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Again, some places looking fairly soggy today, but it should be a brighter day across parts of the south and another mostly fine and sunny day across northwest Scotland. Elsewhere, though, a lot of cloud around this morning, outbreaks of rain still over the Midlands, Wales, parts of southeast England, some heavier rain coming into parts of northern England as well. We'll see a few showers developing for Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, but I say most of Scotland again set fair. And again, on the west coast, we could easily see temperatures up to 20 Celsius. Cooler on the east coast with a brisk breeze here, and obviously much cooler than yesterday, where we've got the cloud and rain over the Midlands, parts of northwest England and East Anglia. The far south seeing a much brighter day compared to yesterday, staying generally fine here through this evening as the rain starts to edge further northward, staying pretty soggy over parts of northwest England, North Wales. We'll see more showers developing through the night across parts of Scotland. Temperatures mostly dipping down to about 5 or 6 degrees across the south, staying up at 9 or 10 Celsius in this cloudier zone over northern England, southern Scotland. That's making for a grey start to the long weekend. A bit more rain to come here, although it is tending to fizzle out. Again, Highlands, western parts of Scotland generally looking dry and bright. There will be some sunny spells on Saturday across the south, but we are expecting a few scattered showers to develop through the afternoon. But with a bit more brightness, should feel a touch warmer.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God, are you joking? You're joking. Really? Seriously, it's not a line, what is it? Oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you.
The next winning call could be answered by you. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
If you want your news to be straight talking... This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock. It's May the 3rd. This is Britain's Newsroom. I'm Nana Okware, and this is Ben Leo.
Very good morning to you. Coming up on the show, in a devastating blow for Rishi Sunak, Chris Webb has been selected as the new Labour MP for Blackpool South.
Incredibly humbled. We had a record result here tonight, and I promised the people of Blackpool South I won't let them down.
And
an absolutely catastrophic night for Rishi Sunak's Conservatives and a fantastic evening for Labour. Are we now heading into general election territory?
And there are more local election results incoming. Catherine Forster, what is the latest?
Yes, still a long way to go with these results, but a terrible showing for the Tories so far. Could it cause more Conservative MPs to put in letters of no confidence in the Prime Minister and possibly trigger a challenge to his leadership?
Dear, oh dear, what a shambles. And we're also expecting the local mayor election results to start flooding in soon. Anna Riley is in Harrogate.
Yes, verification is underway at Harrogate Convention Centre for North Yorkshire's first ever Metro Mayor, but the results are on a knife edge with the bookies favouring Labour to win here on Rishi Sunak's doorstep.
And Boris Johnson was turned away from his local polling station after forgetting to bring an acceptable form of photo identification. Did the same happen to anyone that you know?
Interesting, isn't it? The results flooding in. It's not looking good for the Conservatives. Terminal, perhaps. They're projected in some quarters to lose up to 500 seats.
But the fact that they're even talking about potential another leadership campaign in between this gap, I just find it...
But why not?
What? But because they're supposed to be running the country. They should get on with that, like migration, everything else.
But if there's a chance of stopping a socialist Starmer government, surely one last roll of the dice, you're going to lose anyway.
No.
Why not?
One last roll of the die will mean that loads of people who would have voted for them will just be completely fed up, and I think they'll scamper.
Suella Braverman, Priti Patel, perhaps. Let us know what you think. Who would your next Tory leader be? Is it too early to even be talking about that kind of thing? gbnews.com/your say. Before all that, here's your news with Sophia.
Ben, thank you. From the GB Newsroom at 11:02, your top story this hour. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says his party's win in the Blackpool South by-election is seismic. Labour's Chris Webb took the seat, beating Conservative David Jones in second, following a by-election caused by the resignation of Tory Scott Benton. Sir Keir suggested it's time to call a general election.
It is, of course, the most important election result in the sense that it's a direct message to the Prime Minister, because this is a parliamentary seat. That's a 26% swing. That's a huge swing, and it's the 5th swing of over 20% in by-elections that we've had in recent months and years. So it's not a one-off. No denying the mood of the country now is for change, and I think it's for the Prime Minister to allow the country to express that change now in a general election.
The Reform UK candidate, Mark Butcher, came third, just 117 votes behind the Conservatives. Reform MP for Ashfield, Lee Anderson, told GB News the party is making huge strides.
To get 16.9% in the by-election in Blackpool is absolutely fantastic. It's our best ever by-election result. I was thinking about 15, 16%. Just 100 or so votes behind the Conservative candidate. You know, with a few more resources and a little bit, more campaigning, maybe if we got more bodies up there, we'd probably pip the Tories on this one.
Meanwhile, Labour has made huge gains in local elections across England and Wales, winning in key areas such as Rushmore in Hampshire for the first time. It's being seen as a major test of public opinion ahead of the upcoming general election. Labour also won Thurrock and Hartlepool, but the Tories held Harlow. Tory party chairman Richard Holden tried to put a positive spin on the results.
Obviously, there's been a mixed set of results. Some good Conservative colleagues have lost their seats and obviously have been out campaigning hard for them, and sorry for those guys out on the ground. But other places, I think we've overperformed compared to expectations as well. Places like Harlow, which we've held, visited twice by the Labour leader Keir Starmer just in the last few weeks. So there's a bit of a mixed picture there, but I don't want to say that things haven't been very tough for us this evening, coming off what was obviously those vaccine bounce elections in 2021, where we'd made gains after 11 years in government.
Meanwhile, 38 police and crime commissioners are also being elected across England and Wales. Currently, Conservatives have 1 and Labour have 2 in the declared results. In other news, a High Court judge has ruled that the government acted unlawfully by approving a strategy to meet the UK's climate targets. Several environmental charities took joint legal action against the government, saying the strategy ignored the risk of missing targets. In his judgment, Mr. Justice Sheldon ruled the government's plan was not justified by the evidence. And Apple has recorded the biggest drop in iPhone sales in more than a year. Sales for January to March were down 10% on the same period last year, something not seen since the 2020 iPhone model was delayed due to lockdown factory closures. Sales slumped to 4% year-on-year in the first 3 months of 2024. But executives said sales would return to growth in the months ahead, with upcoming product launches and investments in artificial intelligence. And King Charles has been presented with an illustrated record of his coronation almost a year after the historic service. The King has praised the team which created the document, saying, "You deserve a very stiff drink." He made the comments with the Queen on Wednesday in his second public-facing event since his cancer diagnosis. The document follows a centuries-old tradition of creating a handwritten record of a monarch's coronation. But it's the first time to use paper, not the usual animal skin, which reflects the animal welfare views of the King. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Ben and Nana.
Good morning. This is Britain's Newsroom. It's fast approaching 8 minutes after 11 o'clock. I'm Nana Akwe. This is Ben Leo.
Good morning to you. Lots of emails flying in. Do you want to kick off?
No, you go first.
Ladies first. OK. John, you say, for goodness sake, Boris Johnson didn't win the 80-seat majority. It was the Brexiteers. It was Boris and the Tories who threw away all the opportunities that Brexit offered. Of course, Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party stood down in that election, giving Boris and the Tories a pathway to victory. And Michael says, Nana, you are correct. Civil servants are not applying the wishes of this government, which is what the majority of the electorate voted for. This government has been useless. Labour will be a lot worse.
Well, I was going to say, because if you want anybody slightly more on the side of the civil service, or because that's what the head of the PCS agency said, that they would try and bring the government down. But anyway, Lauren said it seems that people have forgotten why one actually votes. It should be about services in this country, not the Gaza nonsense. And KG Cumbria says it just shows what is wrong with Britain when Israel and Gaza are big issues in communities. And Tom says they prevent the planes leaving like they prevent our views being heard. If Rwanda wasn't safe, the left would let the planes go so they can use it for their agenda when people get harmed. They know that this isn't going to happen.
Interesting, yeah. Will Labour be worse than the Tories? I've argued, and I've received a lot of flack for it in recent weeks, that how can Labour, on immigration at least, be any worse than the Conservatives? 700,000 every couple of years coming in legally, a city the size of Birmingham. Then you've got tens of thousands on small dinghies coming, throwing their mobile phones and passports into the water. Can Labour really do any worse than that?
I think you can always do worse. And so, I don't know whether to be any worse or any better, but I think you can always do worse. But Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says that its win in the Blackpool South by-election is seismic.
Seismic, interesting, yeah. Chris Webb, who won the seat, he spoke to GB News earlier this morning.
Incredibly humbled. We had a record result here tonight, and I promised the people of Blackpool South I won't let them down. Day in, day out, people were telling me that they're worse off under this Conservative government. They've had 14 years of decline in Blackpool. Blackpool's a worse place under this government. They want change, and they know a Labour government can deliver that. So I've been a community activist in the town for over a decade. I work with the food bank. I lead an award-winning mental health charity in Blackpool as chair of trustees. I know the issues in my community. I'm Blackpool born and bred. I see them day in, day out, and I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and get on with the job. Keir's very popular in Blackpool. We've seen that. He's a friend of Blackpool. He's been here several times meeting young people, going into our deprived areas, and always gets an incredible reception. And this is another vote for his victory and why people want him in Downing Street.
Well, to be fair, I mean, he's a local, he's really close to the area, and I don't know whether any of you saw it, but Lee Anderson did post a view of one of the streets in Blackpool that didn't look great at all. And then shortly after he posted it, somebody cleaned it up, but that is obviously under Tory rule. Well, we're joined now by political correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, OK, so all of this disaster for the Tories, do you think this spells the end for Rishi Sunak, and are they likely now to try and change leader?
Well, I think the next few hours and days will be really, really crucial, and we will find out more about the state of the Conservative Party. It is looking like the Conservative Party is going to suffer catastrophic losses in the region of about 500 seats. Now, if that is the case, then morale will be very low indeed on the Conservative backbenches, and we could start to see those letters of no confidence in Rishi Sunak start to flood in. If that happens, we'll be in a situation where we could be looking at a possible no-confidence vote. People I've spoken to think that Rishi Sunak would almost definitely win that no-confidence vote. But if it got to that stage, it could be that the Prime Minister decides that it is the moment to call a general election. So I don't think we're looking at the end of Rishi Sunak, per se, and a new Conservative leader, but we could be looking at a general election much, much sooner than we were predicting. And that is because the scale of these losses is just phenomenal. Here in Blackpool South, where I am, the Conservatives lost with a 26-point swing towards Labour. Now, that is twice what Labour needs to win overall general election majority. And it's not the only time. This isn't some sort of anomaly. In fact, this is the 6th time since the 2019 general election that Labour have won a by-election on a swing of more than 20%. This is really, really bleak for the Conservatives. We are looking at the sort of territory that we were looking at between 1992 and 1997. And of course, at the end of that, Tony Blair won with a landslide victory. Some pollsters are even suggesting that the Conservatives could go down to fewer seats than they held in 1997. There are very few Conservatives I've spoken to who think they have any chance whatsoever of winning the next general election. What they're talking about now is mitigating losses. They want to have at least some semblance of a strong opposition so that in 4 or 5 years' time, they might, just might, stand a chance of coming back into power. The question is, do they want to do that with Rishi Sunak at their helm? Plenty of them over the next coming hours and days will probably decide it's worth another roll of the dice.
Yeah, Olivia, of course, it was a by-election. The turnout was 32.5% compared to 56.8% in 2019. Labour were down 1,700 votes on 2019. The Tories down more than 13,000. But crucially, Reform UK were just 100 votes behind the Tories. Do you think the Conservatives will be looking to do some sort of pact with Reform in the run-up to the general election, whenever that may be?
I think it's quite possible that the Conservatives would like to do a deal with Reform. I think it's unlikely that Reform would be interested in a deal. Everyone I've spoken to from Reform says that they're not sort of Tory-like, they're not kind of an extra wing of the Conservative Party. They want something different. Their form of conservatism, small c conservatism, they say is very different from what the big C Conservatives in the party are offering. They want to be a force to be reckoned with in the Red Wall, and they say that if there ends up being a split on the right, which Conservatives warn against, and if the Conservative vote gets split between the Conservatives and Reform and Labour end up winning, well, Reform say, so be it. We're not here to prop up the Conservative Party. We have a completely different proposition. So I think that, unlike in 2019, when Boris Johnson's Conservative Party were trying to get Brexit done, as were the Brexit Party, there was an obvious deal to be made. This time, there isn't really anything like that. And that is bad news for the Conservatives. Reform wanted to come in second place. They wanted to beat the Conservatives. They didn't quite do it, 117 votes in it. But in somewhere like Blackpool South, one of these really important Red Wall seats, they did come very close. And if that result is echoed across the country, that could be even more of a hammer blow to Rishi Sunak's Conservatives.
Olivia Utley, thank you very much. Lovely scene behind you as well. Lovely shot there. But joining us in the studio, our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, so you heard what Olivia said, and it does seem like this is a big blow for the Conservative Party. And they're talking about changing leader before another general election. I mean, is this madness?
Well, I think the majority of Conservative MPs, certainly ones that have spoken to me, think that it would be. James Cleverly, the Home Secretary, was talking to journalists a few days ago and basically said, if you're going to jump out of a plane, you need to make sure that you've got a good parachute. And he was basically saying, if you push out Rishi Sunak, you haven't got, he said it was madness, basically, and a lot of them think that it would be after the chaos that we've had. But, of course, there's others, like Dame Andrea Jenkins, who came out with her no-confidence letter, said she publicly, who think that Rishi Sunak is the problem and that it can't be any worse. I have to say that's not the majority view, but certainly there will be a lot of nervousness over the next few days in Number 10. Other Tory MPs might decide that they have nothing to lose. They could. I don't think it will happen, but it could trigger a vote of no confidence.
They've got everything to lose, I think. They've got everything to lose.
The analogy about if you're going to jump out of a plane, make sure you've got a parachute, they're talking about that now. Shouldn't they have been considering that when they got rid of Boris Johnson?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but
it's a bit late for that.
But the point is that the Conservative MPs at that time, and yeah, sure, it was Chris Pincher that broke the camel's back, but there was Partygate that started with the Owen Paterson affair. It was a long list of things. Conservative MPs that took him out did so because they were convinced that he had stopped being an electoral asset and they had become an electoral liability that was going to lose them the next general election. That's what they thought. Of course, then Conservative members put in Liz Truss. That lasted 7 weeks. She was beaten by a lettuce, as everybody likes to joke. And then we have the financial meltdown and all the chaos that caused. But then Rishi Sunak came in and he was supposed to be the guy that would get them back on track, that would calm everybody down, would get things better. And it hasn't really happened because although the polls are not quite as bad as the height of the Liz Truss chaos, but basically they have flatlined, and no matter what he has done, and let's face it, they've given pretty big tax cuts over the last few months, 4p off national insurance. OK, the tax burden overall is still rising. They've made this big announcement on military spending. They think they're going to get flights to Rwanda soon. Yeah. But none of this really seems to be having any effect with voters. OK, Catherine, thank you very much. I'm delighted to say we're joined now by Conservative MP for South Northamptonshire, Dame Andrea Leadsom. Good morning, Dame Andrea. Thank you for joining us. Very much appreciated. I'll get your thoughts on the election situation in just a second, but we were just talking about how the Conservatives got to this point. Some would argue that it was the
the ousting of Boris Johnson by his own MPs, who he helped win a massive majority in 2019, that caused this terminal decline for the Conservative Party. You, Andrea, condemned Boris Johnson's unacceptable failings of leadership in 2022. Do you regret getting rid of Boris Johnson waking up this morning?
Well, to your first question, which is one about how do we get to this point, and the reality is that we had that once in 100 years pandemic, the COVID pandemic, that was closely followed by the Putin's aggression in Ukraine, which has had the most devastating impact on our economy. So we then had the cost of living crisis, the energy crisis, and actually nobody has done more than Rishi Sunak, first as Chancellor during pandemic and then as Prime Minister, to try and alleviate the pressure on people. But nevertheless, I'm afraid, I think last night is the culmination of that problem arising post-pandemic, post-cost of living crisis when inflation was at 11%, that means people do feel that things aren't working for them. And although inflation is now much lower, real wages are rising, we finally got the Rwanda legislation through so we can start to send illegal migrants off to Rwanda in line with what people want. Nevertheless, they are feeling fed up. And, you know, so first of all, I do feel deeply sorry for all those excellent Conservative councillors who've lost their seats last night. But I also have to say I understand the many people who've voted effectively against the Conservatives or who've sat on their hands because they are just fed up. But I would say to them is that, you know, things are improving, and we've seen that with inflation down, with employment up, with growth in the economy against a forecast of a huge recession, which never happened. So I don't think things are as bad on the ground as the results last night might suggest.
But all of this, that is great, but it does feel a little bit like it's a little bit too late now. But the Conservatives are talking about changing of leader before the election. In your view, is that a wise thing to be doing?
No, I don't think it is. You know, I think in Rishi we've got somebody who is totally focused on the things that matter to people. So growing the economy, getting inflation down, stopping the small boats, getting NHS waiting list down. He's absolutely focused on those and making inroads in every area. I think it would be a big mistake. We just need to get behind him and help him to see this through, and certainly make the case to the public that things are genuinely improving. But also I think we have to remind them, you know, that back in 2021, which was the high water mark when the Conservatives did incredibly well at the local elections, that was post-pandemic, when Rishi Sunak as Chancellor and Boris as Prime Minister had supported millions of people in their jobs, thousands of businesses to avoid bankruptcy, and we'd rolled out the fastest COVID vaccine, and we'd come out of lockdown earlier than other countries. So that was a real boost time. And now we're in that sort of trough afterwards where we've really seen the impact on inflation and on the cost of living of that period of lockdown, which the whole world faced. So I understand that people are feeling really fed up at the moment.
Dame Andrea, just very briefly, Sir Graham Brady was talking about the other day, saying that the Conservative members shouldn't be involved in selecting a leader. Lots of members tell us on a daily basis that the Conservative Party doesn't listen to them anymore. They just don't get it. They ignore them and they feel totally disillusioned, which I guess is what you're seeing with the results from last night. Do you respect the members anymore? Does the Conservative Party respect its members?
Absolutely, we respect our members. I mean, all of us as constituency MPs spend time with our members. We provide talks and Q&A sessions, and we absolutely listen to their feedback. We have policy forums for people to provide input directly to the party on their views. And we're so grateful to all of our members for all that they do. Many of them go on to become councillors or parish councillors. So many do so much.
Why Sir Graham wants them excluded from the membership then, from the leadership race? If you respect them so much, why don't you trust them to pick a leader? Are they picking the wrong leaders?
I'm not aware of that discussion with Sir Graham. I suspect what he would have been talking about was the recent challenges to the leadership and possibly speculating about another one. But as far as I'm concerned, we need to get behind Rishi, get behind the government and keep on with doing everything we can to make people feel better.
Dame Andrea Leadsom, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Right, well, still to come, Emma Webb and Amy Nicol join us to go through some of the other top stories of the day.
Yes, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Stick with us.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The biggest of occasions for England's smallest county. In Rutland, there isn't a single statue. Now there shall be, of one of the most important people in British history, the late Queen. Lord Lieutenant Sarah Furness represents the monarch in the county.
Her Majesty provided us all with a sense of stability and continuity. As head of state, she gave us national identity.
Raising £140,000 in donations, mostly from individuals, the statue in the town of Oakham is the first of its kind to be unveiled since the death of Queen Elizabeth. Howell Pratley is the sculptor.
I am a big fan of public sculpture, being integral to, a friendly, caring community.
Young and old are lining the streets to catch a glimpse of the 7-foot statue, including 89-year-old Joyce Lucas in the front row.
We met her on several occasions in Oakham, and we've got some lovely photographs and lovely, lovely memories. She is the Queen. She was great. She was brilliant, and we miss her.
The Queen's death broke the nation's heart. Her memorial is filling Rutlands with pride. Her image, taken from early Middle Age, set in bronze.
It's a real fitting tribute to the late Queen.
I think it captures our late Majesty's humanity, but also she looks so regal.
Absolutely beautiful.
Queen Elizabeth was Britain's longest reigning monarch. Her reign was great, unlikely to be matched by future king or queen. A legacy of unwavering service recorded in a place of permanent remembrance. Will Hollis, GB News in Oakham.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good morning to you. 11:26, you're with Ben and Nana on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. We're joined again by political commentator Emma Webb and broadcaster Amy Nicol Turner in the studio. Good morning to you both. Amy, shall we lock horns on a trans issue again? Why not? It's a weekly event, isn't it?
For old time's sake, yeah.
So there is a story doing the rounds that Britain's oldest breastfeeding charity has called in regulators amid claims of, quote, harassment and bullying over a policy to include trans women in meetings. So directors at La Leche League, GB, have requested the charity mission intervenes because basically a minority of directors want trans women to be included in these meetings with breastfeeding mothers.
Yeah.
And the majority of the charity board members don't, but there's a big row kicking off.
Yeah, I don't know why you would exclude
trans women who might be breastfeeding their children.
Because they're men?
I think they would breastfeed a trans man. Well,
these are male to female.
No, I completely understand
So
that.
they don't lactate naturally.
They can. It's hormones.
Well, no, they're taking chemicals, aren't they?
It's actually the same science that is used for adoptive mothers, mothers that have had mastectomies.
Amy, it's a chemical concoction which creates toxic sludge.
Well,
if you cared about your child and you're a trans woman, put them on formula, because there's no evidence suggesting that.
Well, it's for. I think it's for the parent. Rather.
That is a very ignorant take, because what the medicine does is it promotes a hormone in your brain, and the hormone creates the milk.
And it can be very harmful to a baby.
There's two actually. There's one hormone that does that. There's another one that helps to build the breast tissue, and one of those chemicals can cause heart arrhythmias in the baby. So they create this thing that they've put together. There is no evidence to. They've measured the level of testosterone in the milk, but they haven't actually measured what is in the milk itself. So then they also don't know the long-term effect of this sludge.
There's absolutely not.
It doesn't have the same nutritional value.
It doesn't. But then you can't say human milk is always superior to formula milk in terms of the immune system, in terms of fighting infections, in terms of bonding.
Yeah, a woman's breast milk.
A woman's breast milk.
Created in the same
A woman's breast
way.
milk, not an artificially created breast milk from a biological male.
Yeah.
I think this is more about the parent rather than the child. This is about the adult, not the baby's health and well-being. And in any case, this charity was set up for mother-to-mother support for women who are struggling with breastfeeding, to include in an all-female space male men who want to artificially feed a baby from their biologically male nipples. That is against. I mean, the Equality Act allows for same-sex spaces. This is possibly a legal imposition on this charity. And like I say, I think this is for the trans woman, not for the baby.
Breastfeeding.
How can you say that? How is it any different to any mother that wants to breastfeed their child?
They're not women, are they? So listen, I think a real a mother who's actually reared this child would not inflict anything that could cause any sort of
unknown... So would you say the same to an adoptive mother?
Would not inflict anything that could cause some sort of unknown harm. So that's why it appears to be satisfying some weird delusional fantasy.
That's so incredible that you can say it's a delusional fantasy.
View, yeah.
It's just a mother nursing their baby.
It's a man creating milk from his chest.
I think if you can call... You're the one with the deluded fantasy. If you can call a trans woman a man, whatever you just said.
No, I'm talking about somebody who's
chest feeding a baby. That's so incredibly offensive. This is just about including all mothers. On this website, the website says they support everyone who wants to breastfeed, regardless of whether they gave birth. You don't have to have given
Amy,
birth
simple
to
point.
breastfeed. That's one of the...
Got it. Can I ask you a simple question? With the harms or potential harms at this point unknown,
because
not true. It is true, Amy.
It is true.
How can you say that? With the potential harms unknown, we've not got the full picture yet from the scientific studies. Why would any loving mother, if you want to call these people mothers, why would any loving mother take that risk?
Exactly.
Why would you not just give them formula, which you know is safe?
Because the benefits of human milk far outweigh...
Any old milk, though. No, that's not true.
It's not human milk, it's a mother's milk.
Yeah,
because it has to be artificially produced.
Hormones are chemicals. Hormones go in your brain, and your brain tells your body to lactate.
Artificial chemicals.
It's artificial chemicals to cause the hormones.
Yeah, but they could also
do a natural.
But it doesn't have the same nutritional value as a mother's milk.
I'm pretty sure if you looked on the back of a paracetamol packet, it would say something like a very rare side effect could be that, and you still.
Paracetamol.
We give babies all sorts of things,
and also for bonding with a biological male, you can just have skin-to-skin contact. You don't need to artificially produce milk from a male.
I just hope that you apply the same standard to adoptive mothers or mothers who've had mastectomies.
Well, here, I've got a cup of that chest milk right here. Have a sip. I don't think so. Thank you very much, Amy and Emma. Right, let's get the news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Nana, thank you. It's 11:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your headlines. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says his party's win in the Blackpool South by-election is seismic. Labour's Chris Webb took the seat, beating Conservative David Jones in second, following a by-election caused by the resignation of Tory Scott Benton. Sir Keir suggested it's time to call a general election. Labour has made huge gains in local elections across England and Wales, winning in key areas such as Rushmore in Hampshire for the first time. It's being seen as a major test of public opinion ahead of the upcoming general election. Labour also won Thurrock and Hartlepool, but the Tories held Harlow. A High Court judge has ruled that the government's climate plan is unlawful. Several environmental charities took joint legal action against the government, saying the strategy ignored the risk of missing targets. In his judgment, Mr Justice Sheldon ruled the government's plan was not justified by the evidence. And King Charles has been presented with an illustrated record of his coronation almost a year after the historic service. The King has praised the team which created the document, saying, "You deserve a very stiff drink." He made the comments with the Queen on Wednesday in his second public-facing event since his cancer diagnosis. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2560 and €1.1690. The price of gold is £1,831.68 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,206 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Another cracking rendition of Good Afternoon Britain coming up with Emily and Gloria.
Yes,
Congrats.
what a result.
Welcome.
One day only. One day only. Well, you never know. Yes, what a day it's going to be. We have so many live events coming up. Those results are continuing to flood in.
And they're going to tell us so much about where people are in this country. Of course, the story of last night was what happened in that Blackpool South by-election. Labour absolutely delighted with those swings, but because the results come in over a couple of days, really, the story can change. We've got so many mayoral results in our airtime, loads of council results. We're going to, well, we've sort of almost found out what's happening in Tees Valley. Ben Houchen, the Tory mayor, report that he is holding on, but still a massive 19% swing to Labour. Wow. So the Tories will be delighted about that, and Labour will be delighted about the swing.
Yes, it looks like Ben Houchen is going to cling on, but we don't know for sure. We haven't had it officially counted all up, so we'll find out very soon.
There's a couple of new mayoralties as well. There is York and North Yorkshire. That contains Rishi Sunak's constituency, so that will be interesting to watch, and that will be revealed by Emily and I. The East Midlands, loads of red wall seats there. Bolsover, Ashfield, North East Derbyshire. Labour supposed to be the favourites there, but until we hear the result, which you will in mine and Emily's airtime, it's going to be, you know,
we've got loads of great guests on, actually, during our show. We're going to be hearing from Rishi Sunak at the top of the show. We're going to have Richard Tice on to explain what Reform are up to, what are they expecting at the general election, have they actually done very well? They're saying they have. We've also got Wes Streeting on. I think we're going to have to ask him.
Yes, please.
That awful tweet.
It had occurred. Do you know, to Emily, to ask about that? He's very on Wes Streeting. I can't wait to ask him, actually.
He's done other ones that were bad, though, remember?
Gloria,
before.
I should go outraged, you go disappointed.
Yes. I was going to say, where's Tom? He's probably asleep.
He should be asleep. He should be asleep.
Just a quick one for you, Gloria, as a Labour woman. Was that a mistake from Wes Streeting? Because moderates like me, or right-of-centre people, I considered Wes...
Moderates like you, Ben.
I'm a moderate, and I'm in the left. And so is Wes.
He's a left. What are you saying? You're saying he's far right.
I was very surprised. I found out, knowing Wes, having been Wes's colleague, having known him for many years, I found it very un-Wes-like. So, as Emily says, I'm disappointed, Mum. She's cross.
I quite liked him a couple of months ago. I thought he was doing really well. He did some great interviews on Radio 4 about his past. I thought...
We should say what he said. He said that anyone who votes for Susan Hall for the London mayoral election is a white supremacist.
Well, Dennis McShane said them, and that was fair enough. That's what he did. We did challenge him on it, but he did say...
Oh, brilliant.
I'm not in that camp. Yeah, but we're going to ask us about it.
And
we've got Tory and
He'll know it's coming.
As well. We've got loads of great guests.
Where's on? Is he near the end?
Quarter to 3, so you have to watch us all the way.
Of course, yes. Sounds like a cracking show. Gloria, Emily, thank you very much. All that and more coming up just after the break. Stick with us.
Hello
there. I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
King Charles is well known for his views on climate change, and apparently he's now taking steps to make sure that his Sandringham estate is more eco-friendly. Well, it's being reported that the King is planning to have 2,000 solar panels installed on that estate, and it's set to make the estate largely self-sufficient with a supply of its own green electricity. Well, joining me now is former Royal correspondent, the absolute legend, that is Michael Cole. Michael, twice in 2 days I feel blessed. Look, King Charles has long been talking up his eco-credentials. Some may uncharitably compare him to Greta Thunberg in a tweed suit. It's one thing, however, to be self-sufficient in energy, but got to be said, solar panel farms, they're hardly eco-friendly, are they? They destroy environments. What's your take?
I certainly agree with that. The King has indeed, as you say, Martin, and good afternoon to you, applied for planning permission. Now, this is going to be a bit of a mini solar farm, 2,000 solar panels on a site of 2 hectares. And as he has the Sandringham estate, 20,000 acres, 4 acres isn't going to be very much, and it's nowhere near where he lives at Sandringham House. Now, these things, which we're seeing on the screen, are hugely controversial up here. A monster one is being planned on the borders between Suffolk and Cambridge, and the people there really despise it. As they say quite rightly, is this grade A agricultural land being turned over to this semi-industrial use and spoiling the look of the countryside and changing it in a negative way.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
10:40. It's Ben Leo with my nana on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Now let's continue our coverage of the local elections. Labour, they overturned 24 years of Tory control at Rushmore Council, which is the home of the British Army. So let's cross live there now with GB News reporter Ray Addison. What's the latest, Ray?
Yes, well, good afternoon, good morning to you. Welcome to the home of the British Army here. Aldershot, very much part of Rushmore Borough Council, nearby Farnborough as well. Now, this has been home to the Parachute Regiment over the years, currently home to the 101st Logistics Brigade, and very much part of what we would call the Blue Wall. Ever since this constituency was created, there's been a Tory MP here, and ever since the councils existed, there's been a Tory-led council as well. That's been for the last 24 years at least. Now, the result came through shortly after 3 a.m. this morning in the building behind me, Prince's Hall, that Labour had won 9 out of 13 seats that were up for grabs. Tory gaining 3 and Lib Dems just winning 1. So that means that Labour now has control of that council. Now, they had been laying the groundwork. They'd sent John Healey MP, that's their shadow defence secretary. He was here just a few days ago. He was speaking to some of the service personnel here as well. And they've got concerns about the quality of the accommodation for some of the squaddies, and that will definitely have helped potentially get them some more votes. That was covered by the local papers. Conservative councillors here as well, blaming Reform, saying that they lost votes to them. I had a look through, added up some of the numbers. If Reform hadn't been on the ticket and those votes had gone to the Tories, the Conservatives would have had 2 more councillors and they would have retained control of this council. Turnout not too huge, around 34%, so perhaps a little bit of apathy there among the voters. So I'm not sure how much we can extrapolate from this result to the upcoming general election, whenever that might be. But Labour really keen to push this as a truly historic win for them. They say it's proof that the party has changed since its time under Jeremy Corbyn. Of course, you know, his views about the military and the army. And one party spokesperson has said people in Rushmore know that only Labour can deliver the change that they want. So they're using this as proof now that a general election needs to be called, and they say that this is simply a result that Rishi Sunak cannot ignore.
It seems quite surprising that I mean, I see the Conservative Party have been a bit of a disaster, I have to admit. We've all watched it. But the Conservatives were promising to spend 2.5% of GDP on weapons and so on and so forth on the armed forces. And you would have thought that might have swayed some of the voters. But it appears that they weren't having any of it.
Well, the thing of this town, I used to live down the road in Farnborough, which is not very far from here. It's about 10 minutes drive from here. Now, Aldershot has always been known for its problems. It can be a bit of a problem area, and there are higher rates of crime here as well. And although I haven't lived in this area for many years, it's certainly an area that could do with a spruce up, if we can put it that way. And so that could have had an impact as well. And so perhaps some of these lack of votes going towards the Tories and switching towards Labour is just an indication of that kind of trend that's going on at the moment.
Thank you very much. Really good to talk to you. Up next, we're expecting some of the mayoral elections to come in at any moment now. Do not go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello, time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Bit of a mishmash again today. Lots of places grey with some heavy rain around, but it's a brighter day in the south and it's another mostly fine day across northern Scotland. In between, though, low pressure and weather fronts are providing a lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain. Some heavy downpours across parts of Lincolnshire and Yorkshire, extending into the North Midlands. The odd rumble of thunder, maybe further north as well, parts of northwest England, southwest Scotland. But for much of northern Scotland, central Scotland, dry and fine. Warmest spot likely to be western Scotland, where we could get 22, 23 degrees. Elsewhere, a lot cooler with the cloud and the rain over these central areas, particularly chilly on some North Sea coast. But it is a brighter day across southernmost parts of England. Better chance of staying fine and dry here. And that dry, clearer weather will spread north as we go through the night. We'll keep outbreaks of rain going over much of Wales, the Midlands and northern England, parts of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland too. That northwestern corner staying dry and fine. With the cloud, that keeps the temperatures up in double digits. Quite a chilly start then to the long weekend in the south, but hopeful for a bit of sunshine here. Actually, generally, fine day tomorrow over South Wales, southern England and East Anglia. Drying up process over northern England and the Midlands too. But a grey day for much of the north. Some rain, although nothing too heavy. Again, the Highlands of Scotland doing OK for some sunny spells and temperatures here in the high teens, but cooler where it stays fairly dull. Bye for now.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Gloria De Piero. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good morning, 47 minutes after 11 o'clock. This is Britain's Newsroom with me, Nana Akwe, and Ben Leo. Now, there are mayoral elections. They're taking place in 11 regions in England, and all eyes will be on Tees Valley in the West Midlands, where Tories Ben Howsham and Andy Street are currently in charge. Although, Ben, we do have some sort of inside information about what's happening in London as well.
Nana and I mean, this is bombshell if you ask me. Nana and I, separately, over the past hour, we have heard from multiple sources that Labour chiefs are concerned about the way London is going, the mayor race between Sadiq Khan and Susan Hall, the Conservative candidate. It was meant to be nailed on, wasn't it, Nana? A dead cert.
Right, a dead cert.
But there are whispers and rumours now that all is not as clear-cut as was made out to be.
Well, and it doesn't sort of surprise me, because outer London is a very large area, and I can't imagine that any of those in outer London are happy with ULEZ, even if you don't have to pay for it, because a lot of people suspected that the reason why it was there was actually paving the way for pay per mile. Because obviously, when everybody is ULEZ compliant, they won't get any money out of it. So what's next? You've got the cameras, you've got everything else. Everyone's got a ULEZ compliant car. You're not going to make any money.
So apparently there's concern about low turnout in the capital, which would be a detriment to Labour and Sadiq Khan. And also, I just wonder whether the interventions from the likes of Wes Streeting, we've already touched on his absolutely ridiculous tweet calling Susan Hall voters white supremacists. I mean, how can anyone be who's concerned about net zero, as you've talked about, kids getting knifed in our streets, knife crime? How can anyone who's concerned about that be a white supremacist or an Islamophobe?
Well, you'll be on here on GB News at about just before 3 o'clock.
Very much looking forward to that, because I hope Emily and Gloria really take him to task on that. Was that kind of intervention, would that put Labour voters off? Because, of course, Hillary Clinton did the same thing in the 2016 US presidential race, calling Trump voters deplorables, and look how that turned out.
Well, let's continue this. Anna Riley is in Harrogate and Will Hollis is in Nottingham with their mayoral results. They'll be announced very soon. Anna, what's the latest?
Well, Nana, the declaration has just been made as to the turnout, 29% turnout here for the brand new position of Metro Mayor for Yorkshire, North Yorkshire and York. There was an electorate of just over 640,000 and counting is now underway. It's said to be a real tight race between the Conservative candidate and Labour, with the bookies actually favouring Labour to win. That'll be a real blow for Rishi Sunak, of course. Richmond is in North Yorkshire, that's his constituency. So for Labour to make a win here, that will be a real blow for him, as North Yorkshire is a traditional blue area. There's 6 candidates in the race, as well as Conservatives and Labour. There's Lib Dem, Green and 2 independents as well that are vying for this role. They'll be heading up the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority, and the Mayor will have £540 million to spend over 30 years. That will go on adult education, it'll go on public transport and housing as well. So a real tight race here to see who comes out on top, and when we have those results we will be bringing those in.
Exciting stuff. Right. Well, Will Hollis, where are you, Will?
Yes, well, this is Nottingham's tennis centre, and this is the centre for where the count is taking place for Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, combining 17 different councils to make the brand new East Midlands Combined County Authority, and similarly with North Yorkshire. This is a brand new area, so this is the first time that these candidates and the local people had an opportunity to elect a mayor for the East Midlands. Now, the battlegrounds have been drawn for a few few months now, particularly on the lines of the economy in the local area. The East Midlands is traditionally one of the lowest funded regions in the country, as well as things like transport. HS2, when it was scrapped a giant train station here in the East Midlands at Towton, where millions of pounds had been promised for the local area. So those 2 points in particular will be things that people are looking at, particularly when they were voting for any of the mayors. 6 different candidates, including Labour, Conservative, Independents, Reform, the Liberal Democrats and the Greens. There will be a close watch on what happens, particularly in the East Midlands, because it is a centre part of the Red Wall, particularly for coal mining areas in North Nottinghamshire, where until quite recently the Conservative MP for Ashfield, Lee Anderson, left the party, joined Reform. So how well Reform does here, similarly to what we saw in Blackpool, may signal what might happen in the near future when we do see a general election. Now, counting has not yet started here in Nottingham, but we can expect it to start quite soon, and we are expecting a declaration around 2 o'clock later this afternoon.
OK, Will, Anna, thanks very much. Let's get stuck into some quick emails before we hand you over to the good ship Good Afternoon Britain. Jones says, why is Wes Streeting still an MP after his appalling statement about Tory voters? Much worse than what Lee Anderson said, and he was thrown out of the Conservative Party.
That's exactly what I said about that. Well, Tim says Rishi's defence spending promise would carry more water if the amount was inflated by counting service pensions in the overall amount. Yeah, I can see what you're saying. I've got one from Andrew, so I'll do this one.
Yep.
Andrew says Starmer is calling for an election now because he's so very scared that things will change dramatically in November, and once his so-called manifesto is finally revealed. He is not home and he knows it.
And May, good morning, May. You say Tories can blame Reform UK all they want. The votes would have gone to independents if Reform was not there. The sooner they understand there is no way we will ever vote for them again, the better. Well, there you go, Mary. Get off the fence, why don't you?
Well, listen, there's so much still to come here on GB News and Good Afternoon Britain. Remember, they'll be talking to Wes Streeting. He can answer with regard to that.
And Rishi Sunak at the top of the hour as well, coming imminently. And as you just mentioned, I'm really looking forward to this confrontation with Wes Streeting. Conversation. Well, he should...
Don't scare him.
He should be confronted about those comments. You cannot call people concerned about knife crime, ULEZ, safety of the streets, white supremacists and Islamophobes. It's just ridiculous.
Well,
and it's a shame because I quite liked Wes up until a couple of months ago.
Well, you saw what happened to Lee Anderson when he made some comments, so Wes does need to answer for himself. But that's it from us here in Britain's newsroom. It's been a pleasure. Up next, Good Afternoon Britain with Gloria and Emily. We will see you tomorrow. Thank you very much, Ben.
Thanks.
Great show. Gosh, Ben and Nana, they've teased our show for us.
They can't let it go, can they?
I know.
They can't let that Wes Streeting
It's going to be a good
go.
one.
If you don't know what it's about, you will find out very soon.
You will indeed. We've got so much coming up. Lots of live election results, mayor elections, local elections. They're still flooding in, aren't they?
Yes, and we've got some brilliant guests. We've got the leader of Reform. We'll have the first words from Rishi Sunak in his response. Wes Streeting from Labour, Jacob Young from the Tories, a pollster, the legend that is Alistair Stewart. We've got it all for you, haven't we?
We've got it all. All of that after your weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Again, some places looking fairly soggy today, but it should be a brighter day across parts of the south and another mostly fine and sunny day across northwest Scotland. Elsewhere, though, a lot of cloud around this morning, outbreaks of rain still over the Midlands.